Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 676th edition of the Feuerstein's Fire American Soccer Show. I'm your host, Daniel Feuerstein. I'll give you an American perspective of our clubs, leagues, players, national team, and other fabulous moments. Get your daily reading from me and other writers over at Beyond the 90 at beyondthe90.substack.com and locally in the New York sports area on baddogsports.com until Mr. JJ Pavlik is back from his injuries, and then I will return to ajmsportsfc.com. The chat room is open on YouTube, so head on over to YouTube, talk amongst yourselves if you like. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities as we get ready to talk wonderful things about American soccer. Now, obviously, last night, once again, I understand everyone's anger. I understand everyone's being upset with the loss and how certain things did not happen. And once again, all I can say is, the problems with this team was not heart, was not passion, was not wanting to be there. It was a group that did well. Not great. Good. I'll say good. But look, they did well for what they were able to accomplish. And once again, I understand Trinidad and Tobago is not a top-ranked team. I also understand that Saudi Arabia, even though they are the guest team, are a very, very tough side when you're trying to break down their defense. In the run of play, they were compact, they did not look out of place, and they played very hard defensively. Where you got them was on a set piece. When it comes to that match against Haiti, yes, they should have done better. Yes, they should have scored more goals than the two that they did. And unfortunately, they coughed up a goal against Haiti. But look, that's CONCACAF. You are going to face these teams within the region that are looking to knock out the U.S., period. And then against Costa Rica, that was an even game. Yeah, there were mental mistakes made by allowing Costa Rica to get 2 goals, one of them on the penalty spot. But we saw players that are able to play for the national team. But unfortunately, we also saw players that are not ready for the national team or cannot play on the national team. I don't have to keep repeating myself. You know who they are. Everyone knows who these players are. Everyone knows what they are not capable of doing. And for now, they don't deserve to be on this World Cup roster next summer. And if some of these players are going to go to Europe and play with some of these fantastic clubs, obviously, if they're not in the Premier League, it doesn't matter, because if you go to England, any club in England is good enough. Any club in England can be a great starting point. But once again, they have to prove to those clubs that they go to in Europe and in England, especially in England, that you will listen to their instructions and you got to play better, because you're going to be basically staying on the bench, be in a reserve game, or just be used as practice. And you'll only be used for a League Cup match or an FA Cup match. That's it. So if Patrick Ajimong wants to be better, wants to improve himself, wants to go out there and tell the head coach, whether it be Mauricio Pochettino or whoever takes over after him, he needs to do better. He needs to do better. He must do better. But the truth is, if he's not going to listen, then he won't get picked at all. And that is the issue right now. The quality of these players on this team as a collective was not good enough. Saying he sucks is not true analyzing the situation. If Patrick Ajimong wants another opportunity for this national team, he's got to be better. And we'll see what happens, now with these friendlies coming up, because that's it. There are no more competitive games. And in my article at Beyond the 90, the fault truly lies, not just some issues with Pochettino's coaching, because he did make some mistakes. I will agree he's made some mistakes. But the entire thing is not on his shoulders. You can't argue against injured players who are not on the roster. And that was an issue. You cannot argue about certain clubs not allowing their players who, of course, like Borussia Dortmund, like Juventus, who had, in their respective clubs, Weston McKennie, Tim Weah at Juventus, and Gio Reyna with Borussia Dortmund. They did not get released for the national team after their Club World Cup run was over. And so you can't really blame those players. I can blame Weston McKennie for those comments that he made supporting Christian Pulisic when he wanted to take his little vacation. The problems are on Pulisic for not being in the camp for both the friendlies and for the Gold Cup tournament. I understand said, yeah, I'll be in the friendlies and I'll go but I don't want to go to the Gold Cup. No, either you go for the whole thing or you stay at home. And, this mentality really has to end. It really does, because it's a very, very bad look for Pochettino, for U.S. soccer, and for this national team that basically had a full cycle in nearly 2 years under Greg Berhalter, and he failed. Sure, he won a Nations League. Two Nations League he's won. He's won a Gold Cup. He's lost a Gold Cup. But, he barely got out of World Cup qualifying to go to Qatar. He drew Wales. He drew England. A 1-goal victory over Iran. And then he got destroyed by the Dutch. And that Copa America, my friends, I don't have to keep repeating myself to you all. We all saw what happened. We all saw the absolute disgrace under what Greg Berhalter did with this national team. And unfortunately, these players continued on with it when Mauricio Pochettino came over. You all have to understand something here. It's not just what USA does in international soccer, but now in CONCACAF, you have nations, whether they're great or small. Canada has improved. Forget about what happened in this Gold Cup when they lost to Guatemala in the quarterfinals. Forget that for now. The truth of the matter is this, that Canada has improved. Mexico has now improved, but we'll wait and see if when Javier Aguirre leaves Mexico and if his predecessor, or I should say not his predecessor, but the next in charge of what Rafa Marquez will do with the senior men's national team for Mexico. Because once Aguirre leaves, until Rafa Marquez proves himself, they'll go back to being one of the worst national teams in this confederation. Again. And the only way saving them are the officials. I mean, Costa Rica is improving. Panama with Thomas Christensen is improving. Dominican Republic has now unearthed themselves. We'll see what Jamaica will do. I mean, Curacao had a bump in the road, but they have also improved themselves. Once again, you cannot take lightly some of these nations within CONCACAF. Sure, you're laughing at me right now. You're probably saying, oh, that's just a joke. You know this confederation's a joke. There's no way, no way that we have competition outside of Mexico and Canada. Panama is just a bogey team. There's no real competition in this confederation. How do you know? How do you know? Do you pay attention to what goes on? Do you actually look at every single match competitively between these nations in the Caribbean zone, in the Central American zone? Do you? You know, I try to watch as many CONCACAF Nations League group stage games in all three leagues as much as possible. It's difficult when you only have one computer, one smart TV, and I'm trying to watch everything that I can. So not only do I learn what goes on within the Confederation, but I can articulate it for all of you to show you what they can do. I also keep track of the standings in each group, all the fixtures and all the tables in League A, League B, League C, in the Nations League. Then, of course, what happens in World Cup qualifying and what happens in the Gold Cup itself. We can no longer ignore what is in this confederation. We can't, because you have to understand they have the same desires that we do. They want their football federation to improve, to be a name on the big stage. Yes, we have the money. Yes, we have hidden talent. Yes, some of that hidden talent, if not able to go to the U.S. men's national team, are now going to Guatemala. You have seen now Guatemala looking for Guatemalan Americans to play for their national team if they become professionals in either through college, through the USL leagues, through NISA, through MLS, whatever have you. If they are not going to be on this U.S. men's national team, Guatemala will snatch them up if they are Guatemalan Americans. Same thing for Panamanian Americans. Same thing for anybody and everybody. You have to understand you cannot ignore this confederation any longer. We are seeing the improvements in front of us. And if we continue to ignore this, we're going to cut off our own noses in spite of our faces. So please, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention to what goes on. Pay attention. Go and watch on either Paramount Plus streaming. Watch on CBS Sports Golazo Network whenever there's a match scheduled there, whether it's on your smart TVs, your computers, your laptops, your web-enabled devices. Watch these Nations League games. If you think they're boring enough, fine. That's your fault for assuming this. We are no longer alone. It's no longer Mexico and the United States. It's now Canada. It's now Panama. It's now Dominican Republic. It's even Costa Rica. Guatemala has improved. Jamaica, if they ever improve, look out. Trinidad ever improves, it's unbelievable. Curacao, even though they've had a bump in the road, they have improved themselves. Stop ignoring what is around us in this region. Stop assuming everything's got to be through Europe and South America. Include what goes on in our own backyards internationally. And once the U.S. soccer and our national team understands this, then maybe we don't have to worry every single time there is an issue during the international match day windows, whether they're friendlies or competitive matches. But until then, we'll just have to wait and see what's going to happen here. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a great show for you tonight, and it is an honor and a privilege to have these men talk about something special that happened 75 years ago in Brazil at the 1950 World Cup during the group stage. It was amazing to even know that this happened. The greatest upset in world football, world soccer history, as the United States defeated England by a final of 1-0. Joining me right now from the Society of American Soccer History and, of course, his podcast, Soccer Made in St. Louis, we have right now Dave Lange joining us. And we'll also have very soon a very special guest joining us as well. And I cannot wait to have him on. And it will be former ESPN soccer analyst and St. Louis native Ty Keogh will join us as well. But first, Dave, welcome to the show again. First time on this platform since Blog Talk Radio called it quits. Great to have you on, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. And, Dave, I have to be honest with you. When I got back into this sport in 1994 for the World Cup, I had no idea about 1950 at all. I had no idea that back in the day, that in the first World Cup in 1930, this U.S. men's national team went all the way to the semifinals, unfortunately losing to Argentina, but still, though, to be in the inaugural World Cup was just tremendous and amazing to even talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of that very first World Cup, and to imagine, the United States getting all the way to the semifinals, it's really mind-boggling to think about that.
It really is. And now I'm very happy to introduce the other guest on tonight's show. He is a former ESPN soccer analyst when MLS got started in 1996, also covering the U.S. men's national team, a St. Louis native as well, and former St. Louis Billiken soccer player, indoor soccer player coach, the one and only Ty Keogh, joining us tonight as well. Ty, thank you for your time. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show tonight. Your father, Harry, was a part of that magical 1950 World Cup team that did the unthinkable on that afternoon at Belo Horizonte.
Well, we're very proud of the fact that in our family that my dad, Harry Keogh, played right back for the U.S. in that massive upset at a World Cup. It was not a friendly. It was a World Cup match in Brazil. And we're also very proud, being St. Louisans, that my dad was among the 5 St. Louis players who were in the first 11. And in those years, there were no subs. So the 11 that started the match, if they were able to finish, those 11 finished the match. And 5 St. Louis guys were instrumental in that huge upset.
Dave, I can't say at night because I don't think there was any light stanchions back in the day in the World Cup in those early days, like Major League Baseball. There was no night games. Everything was played during the day.
Absolutely. And it was played in a 30,000 seat stadium. The reports are that about 10,000 people were there when the game started, but by the end of the game, they say it was filled up because people heard what was happening and they gravitated to the stadium because the Brazilians desperately wanted the United States to beat their arch rival England.
Amazing. It really goes to show you the level of discontent England has always had, even back in the old days. I'm not going to go too far, like, 1776, but I think we all get the idea. Let me just throw this up here, everyone, because, there it is, the poster or the program from that World Cup. Of course, United States 1, England 0 on June 29th, 1950. Ty, when you talk to your father about that match against England, what are some of the things that you remember him talking to you about, and just how excited were you to hear the stories of that run they made? Even though, unfortunately, great victory against England, they were basically 3 and out in that World Cup.
So was England, by the way. But yeah, I mean, he had a few stories about it, and he certainly, I think he felt a personal pride in that he had marked Tom Finney, a legendary English winger, a very dangerous attacking player. And my dad is the right back. It was his job to try to minimize any impact that Tom Finney might have in terms of creating attacks for the English team. One of the interesting things he talks about when the game ended, my dad said, he almost felt bad for the English players. I think among the St. Louis guys, my dad might have already have been the one that had more of an idea of what the victory meant. He had grown up in a Spanish-American neighborhood in South City, in South St. Louis. And these were families who had immigrated from the north of Spain. And he learned his soccer basically from the kids of those immigrants, from Spanish immigrants. And they had a small library and a reading room. And he said he would go in there and look at they would get the Madrid newspaper, like a week late, basically, the Sunday paper. And he would see the pictures of the soccer players. And he remembered all the old guys in that Spanish club talking about Zamora, the legendary Spanish goalkeeper. So my dad had a little grasp of how big a deal this was in the world, being a World Cup. And he said he felt bad for the English players because he realized how were they ever going to explain how this came about, that a team of amateurs, essentially, and maybe a couple of semi-pros, were able to beat arguably the best team in the world at that time, and certainly one of the top 2 or 3 favorites to take the 1950 World Cup in Brazil.
And Dave, if I can ask you this, obviously learning about this myself, the English media, the newspapers at that time, thought it was a misprint, and apparently they said, "Well, we'll change the score line to England 10, USA 1." And secondly, of course, we all know that there is a black and white news film about it, but apparently the goal was filmed separately from the game, I believe.
It's very hazy, the film of that goal. It looks like part of it was staged later, because you can't really see Joe Gaetjens, who scored the goal, the actual deflection, whether it was deliberate or an accident off his head. It's very fuzzy. And the thing about this game is there's so little footage of that game. It's hard to know fact from fiction because we don't have a lot of facts in terms of actual footage of that game.
Well, Dave, Harry would always maintain that, knowing Joe Gaetjens, that he was a very unpredictable type player, and that he would try crazy things. And it sounds like the fact that he managed to put his head on this long-range shot by Walter Barr was something that, at least in my dad's mind, was something that wouldn't have surprised him, my dad, that Joe Gaetjens would try something like that. So whether it was inadvertent, whether it was just an accidental deflection, or whether he meant to change the actual flight of the ball by throwing his body at it, no one will ever know. But my dad maintained it wouldn't surprise him that in Joe Gaetjens' head, he tried something crazy and it worked.
Your dad's description of the goal in the book, The Game of Our Lives, talks about that. And he said that he launched himself like he was just flying.
Like a torpedo. Yeah,
exactly. And it was interesting earlier, John Clarkey Souza told your dad that this guy scores the most uncanny goals you've ever seen. And he was right.
Amazing. That is amazing, gentlemen. That is just tremendous what stories you can learn from all of this. Of course, your dad, Ty, as you said, how many times seeing his, I guess, friends as well, teammates from the national team, would always come over to the house and just bring back the glory days?
Well, they would talk about it was the whole soccer community. It wasn't just the guys, basically. Any soccer field you went to, if they saw Frank Borghi or they saw Harry Keel, that's the topic that came up. And really, my dad, whenever he talked about the game, talked about Frank Borghi being the difference maker, the guy that really won the game for the U.S. As much as Joe Gaetjens is the hero because of the goal scoring in the 38th minute, which you documented on that last slide. But the fact is, Borghi made some incredible saves. And my dad would always emphasize that in addition to the saves and having a little bit of luck with the woodwork, I think, at least twice, Dave, if I'm correct, England hit the woodwork. But Borghi's ability to come off his line and grab crosses and snare them just before the English forwards were about to put their heads on them, and direct them to goal. He said Borghi was uncanny. Borghi's hands, you can look in the pictures. I mean, he grabbed a soccer ball, looks like he was grabbing a tennis ball. So his ability to come out, not only to cut out the crosses, but to hold the ball and not give up any loose balls or rebounds.
Yeah, and one thing I was amazed at, having met Frank, he was a big guy. But when I looked him up, he was 5'11". But when you met him in person, he seemed so much bigger than that. Just a big man. And as you mentioned, Ty, he was great for pulling down balls in the air. Um, and as you said, he had great hands. He was a former minor league catcher in the
Base,
Cardinals
yeah,
organization.
baseball player. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had those instincts and the ability to throw a ball. So that was a big part of his ability to play in that game.
The interesting thing, also, especially in terms of the movie, The Game of Their Lives, where Gerard Butler plays the role of Frank Borghi, the goalkeeper. Frank was very quiet. He was unassuming, a real gentle giant, so to speak, in terms of what we're talking about. And here in the movie, Gerard Butler gets all the speaking parts, of course, because he's the biggest name in the movie, which is why my dad's comment about the movie was when people would ask, well, Harry, what do you think? Was it the movie true to what you experienced? Was it pretty much like that? He goes, well, I can say this. They did get the score right.
A good story.
Absolutely.
A good story about Frank is getting ready for some of these 75th anniversary things. I talked to one of his sons, Chuck, and I said, Chuck, do you have any memories of your conversation with your dad about the game? And he said, well, one time I said, Dad, how many shots do you think you stopped in that game? And he said, all of them.
That's
But
great.
well, Dave, and the unbelievable story is really the WAR records of both Frank Borghi and Pee Wee Wallace. I mean, these guys saw combat, and the story of Jack Buck and Frank Borghi is incredible. You've told that before. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, this is just 5 years after the war, so a lot of these guys were veterans. And Frank was a medic in the Ninth Infantry Division in a rifle company. That's pretty serious business. And in 1945, he was treating some wounded soldiers, and turned out that one of them was Jack Buck, the Hall of Fame broadcaster. Later on, they were at a dinner 10, 15 years later, and Jack Buck says, I remember you from somewhere. And they started talking. It turns out that he was a guy who treated Jack Buck, and they said, really, he saved Jack Buck's arm, the treatment he gave him at that point.
Yeah, Jack Buck had taken some shrapnel, apparently, in the Battle of the Bulge, I guess, is what it was. So it's kind of incredible. And Pee Wee Wallace was in a German prisoner of war camp. So these guys were part of the greatest generation in a lot of different ways, in addition to what they did in 1950 in beating England. My dad and Gino Periani were the two youngest guys. They didn't turn 18 until after hostilities had ended. My dad turned 18 in November 15th of 1945, and I think Gino didn't turn 18 until 46. So they're at that World Cup. They're only 22 years old, right? So amazing for them to be a part of such a huge upset and a huge game in the history of World Cup soccer.
It really is. I'm going to put this up in a moment, but I wanted to ask Dave this question. Now, obviously, these days with international soccer, international football, FIFA takes seriously where you were born, where your parents were born, and which national teams you can play for. Back then, there was no such thing. I think if you want to say you played in a league game or a rec game in the United States, if you want to be on the national team, you go right ahead. And I'll bring up the roster right now, and just amazing. Where, as you can see, Joe Gatens came from Haiti. Joe Maca is Belgian. And if for some people wanted to know why is there that crest next to Ed McIlvaine, who was the captain of the national team, of course, he's from Scotland. I recently learned he played for Wrexham. Of course, everyone's going crazy with the Wrexham docuseries, so that's why the Wrexham crest was there. And if Rob McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds is watching, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, throw that in there, for your next season. Jeff Coombs, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, turncoat on England, and from Poland, Adam Wolanin, and the head coach himself is Scottish as well. Dave, that's amazing to see all these players, not just coming from United States, but of course, if they've come to work and live and play in the U.S., they were part of this national team.
Yeah, from my understanding at that time, the U.S. Soccer Federation's rules were if you expressed an intent to become a U.S. citizen, you could qualify for the national team. So those guys said, "Yeah, we're going to become citizens," and said, "Okay, you're on the team." So,
Well, what about the current national team, U.S.? There's several guys that were not born in the U.S., right?
right.
So it definitely, there's some fluidity to all of this, and nowadays I think there's more structure to it, and it has to be, fully stamped and approved by FIFA for sure. But this reminds me though of the guys who were the captains in the games in 1950. McIlvanney was the captain against England because clearly, being a Scot, it's a bigger honor for him to be captain against England. My dad against Spain in that, in the first round of the World Cup in 1950. My dad, because he grew up in a Spanish neighborhood, he's an Irish American kid, but he grew up in a Spanish American neighborhood. He could speak some Spanish, and he was the captain against Spain. And then Walter Barr was the captain against Chile. So it got passed around a little bit. It's just kind of an interesting tidbit in terms of who was the captain for each match.
Just amazing to hear that. And, why not? I mean, like you said, your dad lived in a Spanish neighborhood in the section of St. Louis, and why not, represent that neighborhood, even though he wasn't Spanish himself, but still though, just tremendous stuff to hear from you, Ty, about what your dad went through. And Dave, of course, the research you've done has been tremendous as well. And it's just been, sometimes, when you don't know certain things and you want to learn about the history of this game in this country, we do have a history. It just takes the time, Dave, to really unearth all these gems about what has happened, why did it happen, and we actually did have some magical moments for this game in this country, especially in 1950 when they did take out England 1-0.
I think there's some misconception that soccer started in 1950, but in St. Louis, for example, the first game we could find in newspapers is 1875, 150 years ago. We had a league here in 1884, which is 3 years before the Football League in England. We had a professional league starting in 1907, a highly structured amateur league in St. Louis in 1912. So soccer was here and part of the fabric of St. Louis and other cities long before 1950.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it's always great to talk about how the game got started anywhere and everywhere in this country. It does not matter to me, just as long as, we're all on the same page. And that's what's really more important. And Ty, if I can ask you, do you get together, not just with your friends and, of course, the children of some of your dad's former teammates? Do you ever get together talking about that day, talking about what your dads have done, even some of the other players' children that you hopefully are still in touch with? Do you ever reminisce about the days with your parents and your father's times?
Oh yeah, it's interesting in that my kindergarten team, the coaches were Harry Keel and Frank Borghi, because Chuck Borghi's my age, and we were in the same parish, Immaculate Mary in South City. So that's a good start for me, right, to have Frank Borghi and Harry Keel as my first coaches. But yeah, currently I see Glenn Periani, Gino's son. We play on Sunday mornings pretty often together. So yeah, we always put our arms around each other at least for 10 seconds at the beginning of the game, and kind of just think, hey, isn't this great? We're still playing, and we can remember our dads. But Dave, I'm going to just emphasize one more time the huge upset, because England, and I had a full-time professional league starting in 1888. And these guys who beat England in 1950, they were amateurs basically. So that just adds more emphasis to what an accomplishment was for the U.S. to be able to prevail against England at a World Cup.
And I've done a couple of these podcasts, and so have you, Ty, in connection with the anniversary. And two of the podcasts were hosted by English nationals, and both of them said, I hate talking about this game. It's like bringing back bad memories. And it is. I mean, for people in England just still holds like this aura of dishonor that they lost that game. And as Ty mentioned, it was just a terrific upset. Nobody could believe it happened.
So a quick anecdote. Bob Gansler asked me to pick up at the Orange County Airport. This was this was a friendly that the U.S. was going to play in '93, leading up to the '94 World Cup, and they were having like a coaches seminar, and it was Roy Hodgson and Mick McCarthy that I was supposed to pick up at the Orange County Airport because they were coaching Switzerland at the time, and the U.S. was going to play Switzerland. And so I pick him up at the airport. I get him out to the rental car. I sit him down. And we start driving to get on the freeway. And before we get on the freeway, I said, "Hey, guys, my dad played for the England team. I'm for the U.S. team that beat England in 1950. They're like, let us out right here."
That's crazy. That's just
well,
wonderful.
You like to bring it up, don't you?
Of course.
When you talk to English people. Yeah.
Of course. Oh, let me tell you. What the hell? I'll put it up anyway. I was on the BBC World Football phone-in a long time ago, and of course, one of them is a South American reporter who's based in Brazil right now. And I was asking about USA Chile during one of these friendly games, and he's trying to let me have it because I'm an American. So basically, if you guys, if you want a T-shirt out of it, I'll send it to you. Just give me your addresses. I got to find a shirt maker to do it. Here you go.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, you like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then on the back, I'll put all 3 World Cup games and and the results.
Right, yeah, because there's been, a draw, at least one draw in World Cup, 2 draws in World Cups.
2 draws and a win. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in hockey. I'm a New York Rangers fan. Obviously, we had the last time the Rangers won a Stanley. Well, recently 1994, but before that was 1940. And every time the Rangers would be in another building on the road, they get the chants of 1940 all over the place. So I'm thinking maybe one day we'll have either England come back here for a friendly, or we go over to Wembley for a friendly. Maybe the U.S. fans can start chanting 1950. So we'll see what happens. But that's just amazing. If I can, Ty, did you and your father or some of his teammates with their children, have you visited Brazil, Belo Horizonte, to the site of the stadium where that magical moment happened?
I have not been to Brazil. We've got some great newspaper clippings because they did bring my dad and at least one of the English players back to Belo Horizonte. And I want to say it was in the late 1980s. And they made a big deal out of it, but big newspaper coverage there in Brazil. And there was a picture of my dad, like kind of acting like he's waving to the crowd in an empty stadium, basically. But the headline, I don't know if you've seen this, Dave. The headline says, "The postman returns to the scene of his glory," because at the time he was a mail carrier. He worked for the U.S. Postal Service, and he had to leave that Postal Service job just to go to Brazil to play in the World Cup. So it's really cool. It says, "Hey, the postman returns to this, the scene of his World Cup glory," and it's my dad. When he's probably in his late 60s, early 70s, returning to the scene of that great win.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'll bring it up right now because obviously. I admit I am not officially a historian. I'm a somewhat historian, but as you can see here, I got these photos. I'll admit I got it from Wikipedia. That was the stadium when it was like in 1950, and now, of course, they refurbished the stadium back in 2012 up till currently now. Dave, just amazing that unfortunately it's not what it used to be, but I think we understand. The game has changed so much, not just the tactics, not just the technology, but the way that stadiums are being built these days.
So, hey, Dave, let me interrupt real quickly. They did bring back Wilf Mannion, also that same ceremony when they had my dad there in Belo Horizonte, probably 40 years at least after, no, more than probably about 60 years actually after it happened. So roughly 20 years ago is when they did that. But go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
I was just going to say that the field they played on was by no means a premier field, because I've read that it was bumpy, it had some bare spots, high grass in some spots. I mean, basically they put the game there because they figured England's going to win anyway. So, and nobody's going to go watch it. So we'll just put it in Belo Horizonte because, nobody's going to want to watch it anyway. So they kind of got that stadium for that reason. But it was, as you mentioned, Dan, it was by no means a premier field compared to what it is today.
No, absolutely. Some will probably compare that field back then to the office in Jamaica in Kingston. We all know how that field is, Ty. I think you know very well as I do. That's not a manicured field either.
No, and Central America, has a few kind of iffy surfaces to play on as well, which the U.S. has to deal with in World Cup qualifying. But yeah, it's a good point. They figured England's going to win by 4 or 5 goals at least anyway, and they can't complain too much about the surface since they will have gotten the result they looked for, but didn't turn out that way.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the movie, The Game of Their Lives. I have to, I went to the movie theater to watch that, and I was really amazed at some of the moments from that movie. Obviously, the friendly before going to the World Cup, the U.S. played England. And Dave, I would have to assume, was that like a high school field they played on, that friendly? Was it a college? Was it at St. Louis University? Where was that field?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Maybe Ty might know, but I'm not aware where they played. I
Well,
think,
it wasn't in St. Louis.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the English.
Somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah. It was in New York.
Yeah.
It was the English FA-11 was touring the United States.
Was that the one where the U.S. team's wearing Hakoa's jerseys? The Hakoa Sports Club, which is a New York City organization.
Right. Yes, it is.
Yeah. It may have been played at the Hakoa's field.
It might have been. I don't know where.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speculating there.
No, absolutely. I mean, would love to know where in New York it was. I'm assuming they were in Brooklyn, so probably that's where it was. But I'm just guessing. But I am aware of Hakoa All-Stars. Obviously, I am very well aware of them.
Yeah.
And Ty, one of your dad's teammates, and I forget his name, but I remember. Obviously, it's not the keeper, but he always wore gloves. I guess his nickname was Mittens, I believe it was. I could be wrong.
It was gloves.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, gloves Colombo.
Gloves Colombo. Yeah. I'm just, was he that superstitious of some sort? Did he not want his hands dirty or something? I don't know
the whole story, and neither did my dad. But everybody knew Colombo because he, as my dad would say, when he cleared a ball, he cleared the forward about as far as he cleared the ball. He was very physical, and there's always that apocryphal and anecdotal thing where he makes that lunging football, a shoestring tackle of the English forward. I forget which forward it was, but it's rumored that the Italian referee said to Colombo, "Buono, as in good job." So, there's that mystery of, did the referee kind of want England to lose too because there were Italian Americans on the U.S. team? That's one that we'll never know either, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's another one of life's greatest mysteries on a football pitch. That's for sure. And Dave, also from the movie, what really piqued my interest a little bit, of course, not soccer related, was the St. Louis guys hanging around the bar, and the radio, the old-fashioned transistor radio was there, and they're listening to the Cardinals, and it's Stan Musial going to the plate. Just amazing what a great sports town St. Louis is, not just for soccer, but for the Cardinals and baseball.
Well, these guys were, these guys played fast pitch softball in the summer, and they played soccer in the fall and winter. So, they were basically baseball/softball/soccer guys. And the guys, the 4 guys from St. Louis who were from the Hill, the Italian neighborhood, that's the neighborhood that generated Joe Garagiola, Yogi Berra, and Frank Crespi, 3 major league players, all in that same generation with these guys who were on the 1950 team. So they were very aware of baseball and the connection to their neighborhood with these 3 major leaguers.
No, amazing stuff. I'm assuming you saw the movie as well, Ty. If I can ask you this, when you see Patrick Stewart, the famed English actor, I wonder if he's been grumbling under his breath because he is English after all. um, Portraying the American sports writer who saw this entire situation with, of course, unfortunately now the late Grant Wall, who was also in that movie in a cameo. Um, how did you feel about seeing that from the beginning and towards the end of the movie?
Yeah, I was not happy with it. Dent McSkimming did not speak with an English accent, and he would have called someone from St. Louis a St. Louisan. And I don't know if you remember it in the movie. Patrick Stewart calls them St. Louisians, it just rang false, and they, whether that was patched onto the movie because of Patrick Stewart's name or why they cast him that way, I don't know. But yeah, it's one of the more awkward scenes in the movie, no question.
I mean, if I can also ask you this, Dave, I mean, did you feel insulted when that happened?
I felt, first of all, it was great that these guys got recognition that they never really got in the United States. But as Ty mentioned, the way they portrayed some of the players, especially Frank Borghi, I mean, that was completely 180 from what the guy Frank Borghi that I knew. He was not that guy at all, as Ty talked about. So the portrayals were not good. But I'm just glad that those guys finally got some recognition that they deserved after all those years.
Yeah, the other thing about Dent McSkimming, the St. Louis newspaper writer, I think he was with the Globe Democrat, if I'm not mistaken, paid his own way to Brazil. That is how dedicated he was personally to the game of soccer. I mean, he loved the game, and that's why he made sure he was there. And boy, did they make it worthwhile for him to make that long trip, didn't they?
For sure. He's the only U.S. reporter at the game.
Yep.
And he's in the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame, and he was the soccer writer in St. Louis. All the players I talked to respected him immensely because he would tell it like it was. I mean, if you played a good game or bad, there was one instance in particular where a guy had just come back from Korea and was playing his first couple games back from the war. And Dent's story was that he was not in speaking terms with the ball.
Wow. That's just incredible stuff. Obviously we always continue to talk about the miracle on ice moment when the United States men's hockey team in the Olympics defeated the Soviet Union in the semifinal game before finally winning the gold medal. And even though that gets talked about a lot, and I'm happy, of course, when that did happen. My parents are immigrated to this country, not together. They came separately with their parents, and my dad with his uncle from Eastern Europe, in Romania. My parents met in Manhattan, in New York. But for them, it meant something to them to see that, and of course, every American was always happy about that. And the Miracle movie was also done very well. But do you feel, Ty, as well as Dave, and Ty, I would like you to answer first and then Dave, would you like a rewrite of the Game of Their Lives again, maybe with a better cast and a better explanation, and maybe, you and the children of your father's teammates should inform them what should be added or what should be subtracted if it is a rewrite or a redo of that movie?
Well, it is a great story. It has been 20 years, since the Game of Their Lives. So soccer is that much more of a big deal culturally now in the U.S. than it was even 20 years ago, in terms of how much exposure and how many people have grown up with the sport and realize and recognize that it is the world sport. And that's the difference between the Miracle on Ice, which I'm very proud of as well. The Blues, St. Louis Blues finally won the Stanley Cup too here. So we talk about a great sports town, right? Soccer, baseball, ice hockey, and so forth. But you've got a situation where ice hockey, what is it? It's a really big sport in maybe 15, 16, 17 countries, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where you're talking about soccer's a big deal in what, over 100 countries, no question. So the fact that the U.S. made this huge upset in 1950 in the world sport, as opposed to ice hockey, nothing against it. I grew up with the Blues. They showed up in St. Louis as an expansion team when I was 10 years old. So it was a big deal. The Plager brothers and, Red Berenson and all those guys. But the fact that it was a soccer upset in a World Cup, to me, makes it a bigger deal than the Miracle on Ice. I don't think there's any real comparison in terms of sport impact worldwide. It's a story worth picking up. It could be told a little bit more polished way, different cast and so forth. And I think maybe it would be in that this is more of a soccer country now than it was even 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't stick to the book. I mean, I thought the book did a really nice job, The Game of Their Lives.
Jeffrey Douglas did a really good job.
Yeah, they misspelled Charlie Colombo's last name. But from what I understand, Ty, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that whole description of the game is based on your dad's recollection because he had such a tremendous memory. I mean,
he was renowned for that. He could tell basically any game he played in, he could tell you which way the wind was blowing, who the starting 11 for each team was, when the tying goal occurred, and so forth. And he did have that sort of photographic memory, which his father was actually on the $64,000. What do they call it? The $64,000 question was the radio show for baseball trivia, because he had all the baseball stats in his head, and he went 4 or 5 rounds in that and came home with a Cadillac and $5,000 the year I was born. So that was Patty Keogh, Patrick Keogh, born on St. Patty's Day in 1893. My grandfather.
Oh wow,
yeah.
That's true. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And just talk about once again the Joe Buck. I mean the Jack Buck situation. Do you talk? Is Joe friendly with you guys? His son is now with ESPN as an NFL broadcaster, before doing Major League Baseball for the Cardinals and for Fox on baseball. Did Joe Buck ever hang out with you guys as well, or no?
I haven't met Joe. Okay. I knew Jack. Jack was great. Jack was encyclopedic in terms of his knowledge of every sport in St. Louis. He could tell stories about St. Louis University soccer. He interviewed me on KMOX when I was coaching Washington University soccer team, and he started rattling off the years that my dad won NCAA championships with St. Louis U. He had all this in his head, like a Bob Costas does that too. I mean, these guys are just incredible. Jack for sure. I could walk up to Jack and talk to him. I'm 68 years old. Dave's slightly older. So Joe, he's from St. Louis, obviously, and he's been very successful. But I think he works so much, he's gone a lot. I've not run into him here in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just out of curiosity, I just want to know if I ever met the man or not. But now, the World Cup came to the United States in 1994. Great spectacle all across our country. And now it is coming back next summer, even though we are sharing it with Canada and Mexico. And it looks like multi-country participation for hosting rights is now a new thing. And Dave, what does that mean to you to see the World Cup return to the United States next summer?
It's been a long time since it was here, and people have short memories. They're going to be shocked when they see the atmosphere at these games. A good preview of that happened the other night in St. Louis when the U.S. played Guatemala in the semifinals of the Gold Cup. And most of the stadium was from Guatemala. And they said it may have been the loudest they've ever heard a game at the stadium, which is the stadium for St. Louis City MLS team. They said that they were just from everywhere. They just came from all over the country because they had that much passion about their team that they wanted to see them play, even though they lost. They said every time Guatemala touched the ball, the stadium just erupted.
So they paid a premium for tickets too.
Yes, they did.
They were dying to be in that stadium, and I would say the crowd was around 70% Guatemalan.
Yeah.
in the St. Louis stadium, the Energizer Park here. So
Yeah.
crazy. And how about the vendors selling the Guatemalan flags? They made some money too, because there were Guatemalan flags everywhere in the stadium.
Yes.
But the difference also, Dave, about this World Cup that we're mainly the U.S. is hosting it. There's just a handful of games in Mexico and Canada. 48 teams.
Yeah.
In the number of games. I mean, it's going to be a massive undertaking. I mean, we're a big country. We have a lot of great big stadiums, and we have several time zones too. So it's going to be quite an undertaking.
And that time zone issue is going to be interesting, Ty, because a lot of the guys from Europe who come over here to play in MLS, a lot of them say it's dealing with all the travel, because we're such a big country. I mean, 4-hour flight from one coast to the other, 5 hours.
Well, it's a little bit of an adjustment, but come on. I mean, guys used to take, train rides and bus rides, of 15 hours at a time. And plus, these guys get charter flights. I played professionally in this country too. We never were on a charter flight. So these guys, they get to go on charters. They get home, after the game, late. It's a whole different world. So I don't think it's that tough.
No, I mean, look, they got to deal with it. I'm sorry. I mean, every time during this Club World Cup, this new version of the Club World Cup, how many times we have to hear about the heat, the rain delays, this, that, whine about this, cry about that. I mean, it's just getting way too much. I mean, look, are you upset that you came over here and, you don't want to play at your best against one of these great clubs from South America, from Africa, and from Asia? I mean, I know you're not the Oceanic clubs. We don't have to worry about them, unfortunately. But, we knew they were going to get destroyed anyway. But still, though, seeing what has happened here with this Club World Cup has been tremendous.
Well, the only legitimate gripe might be,
mm-hmm.
These guys are asked to play so many games. The calendar, it's a long calendar. They don't get much time off at all to regenerate. So I'll give them that. But the rest of it, they're treated like royalty, and wherever they go, top hotels, charter flights, so on and so forth, and nice paychecks too.
Yeah, that's true. That's all it is. It's about the money. You want the big pay. I think it was someone in Europe, I think, for a club said that, well, if you're demanding the most money, you're going to have to play the most games. I think that's a brilliant response there.
Yeah,
which I do admit that, the calendar is getting more congested each and every year, and I understand that. But still, though, I mean, if you're going to be demanding all this money, then you might as well play all these games.
Right. Well, plus practice is not that much fun.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on who the taskmaster is.
But seriously, when I played professionally in the NASL, I didn't mind playing 2 games a week because you got bored at practice. But by the 3rd or 4th day of training, you're like, let's have a game. Really, games are just much more exciting than one more day of training. Most players, I think, would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I guess finally for me, gentlemen, well, it's a 2-part actually. The first one will be this, and I'll ask you the second one after your answers. Both of you are St. Louis natives. Major League Soccer now 30 years almost in the books, and finally you have a club of your own in this league. I know what took them so long, my God, but I guess it was the right ownership group to come in and build it. I am very happy to see how Energizer Park and the training facility is directly across the street from each other and directly downtown. We just don't have enough stadiums in these downtown main city markets. And, Dave, I'm just happy that this has happened for St. Louis.
Well, I mean, Ty can speak to this more than I can, but when we had the Stars here in the NASL and Pele's playing at these really bad fields, at that time, the Stars were playing at Washington University's Francis Field, which is not a good field. And Ty can speak to them more than I can, but to see this facility and to see what these guys play on and practice on, it's just mind-boggling and such a huge improvement over what we've seen before in St. Louis.
The first time Pele came, he was playing at Busch Stadium too, the baseball stadium, and it was a skin infield. So he was playing on dirt there too. But but the new facility, you're right, it's world class. And what's really amazing, The first couple times I went and toured when it was still under construction, they would take you first to the training fields that were being built, and the locker rooms and all the weight rooms and all the training facilities that are, like you said, Daniel, right across the street from Energizer Park. There's a tunnel that goes under Market Street, which is one of the main avenues in St. Louis Market. So you don't even have to cross the street. There's a tunnel that goes from the training center, and it's a huge tunnel. I mean, you could put semi trucks in there. Maybe they will do if they ever have rock concerts and things like that in there. So you come under Market Street and you step into the stadium, and you're in the bowels of the stadium. But within about 100 feet or so, you step right out onto field level, because field level is 40 feet below street level. So it's really dramatic. And it makes your heart start beating about, hey, we got a team now.
Absolutely. I'll hold off my last question for now. I actually have a viewer that has a question for you, gentlemen, and I'll put it up there. He says, is it true, this is from William Mera first, is it true that after the match against England, one of the American players, I'm not sure if it was Frank Colombo or Perini, was offered a contract with a soccer club in Brazil?
I've never heard that. How about you, Dave?
I have not heard that. No.
Yeah.
No, not heard that.
All right.
Well, their Italian mothers probably would not have allowed
it. You guys speak Portuguese really quickly,
For sure.
And obviously, in about one more cycle left, and that's, of course, 2030, when we will celebrate 100 years of the World Cup. I mean, this wonderful idea from these people in Europe to create a world global soccer event like this, and to go from like 4 groups of 4, sometimes 3, because I believe some teams bowed out or couldn't make it. One apparently missed their ship, which I can't believe that happened, but it did. Are you amazed at how tremendous this tournament has been, not just for the rest of the world, but now for us here, that the demand to make and qualify for the World Cup is just unfathomable in your minds?
Well, it's the beautiful game. It is the world's game, and it's the passion that comes from the people. It's still a working class sport in large parts of the world, although there's more and more luxury skyboxes in all of these stadiums and corporate sponsorship and so forth. But and it's the personalities of guys like Messi and Belo, and through the years, all the great names, Zidane and Platini, of course, in France, and the Italians that have won World Cups. People really live it, and it's in their blood. And so it's become bigger and bigger. I think with the fact that you've got social media, you've got the internet. Before that, you had cable television. Suddenly, people are able, the big markets are able to, including the U.S., are able to recognize really what a scope the sport has in terms of interest around the world.
And Dave?
Ty, you can probably back this up, but when you played that, the sport, I don't think got a lot of respect from most people. The writers love taking pot shots at soccer. Today, I think there's a lot more respect for the game, and that really impresses me. I was at a lunch meeting today, and one of the guys there works in the Cardinals front office, and he said, I watched the first inning Saturday, and then I turned on the soccer game to watch St. Louis City play.
Well, you're right. The media now sees what's going on around the world. More and more of the media have actually grown up playing soccer. So they understand it, they follow it, they have a respect for it, that back in the day when all the media, all the writers were baseball people or football people or basketball people. Yeah.
I want to tell you guys this before I let you go, and this is my own personal experiences as well as a fan of the sport. My dad and my uncle took my mother, my aunt, my 2 cousins, and me to Giant Stadium to watch the Cosmos play. And then when the NESL ended, I was upset But then, I went with the traditional sports leagues, of course. But when the World Cup came in '94, I was excited. I was happy because, we're going to get world-class soccer. And I was hoping and rooting for the USA to do well, which they did, unfortunately. If Tab Ramos didn't get his head cracked open in that tackle from, I think it was Bebeto from Brazil, I would like to think that maybe we would have upsetted Brazil in that second round game. And then, of course, with MLS coming in 1996, I too worked in the sports news industry myself, not at the level you did, Ty, but I worked for a company called the Phoenix Communications Group. They were located in South Hackensack, New Jersey. They were originally Major League Baseball and NHL productions. And when they started to do soccer, I was excited and happy. And yeah, even I got ridiculed for being a soccer fan. I got basically, I had one person who says to me in passing, yeah, soccer players are not real athletes. And I kept quiet. I said to myself, you watch, you'll see. And I can definitely tell you this. I was the only one, except for 2 off days, which I had to have two off days. I worked the entire 2002 World Cup from South Korea and Japan. I had to go from on the Eastern time zone, 1 in the morning till 10 in the morning, 3 match days. And the best thing about working that World Cup is when they played Mexico in the round of 16, the Today Show called my office and asked for highlights from the game.
Yeah.
I watched it. I handed all the tapes in writing sheets to my editor, broke it down. We had our tech to feed out the highlights to Rockefeller Center in New York, in Manhattan. And the next morning, boom, right there.
So it's pretty awesome. Proud. I worked that game, actually. Yeah.
Yes, I know. You and Jack Edwards. And I would love to have you. And on another show, I want to talk to you about that, too. I want to talk about that 2002 World Cup run because.
Hey, Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, 19 years old. They tore it up.
Yep.
And Brian McBride tore it up, too. St. Louis University player.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. They were unbelievable. That run was unbelievable. I still scream out. I'm not saying we've beaten Germany, but we should have had a penalty kick attempt. I will go with that till the day I die. We should have had a penalty attempt because that was a handball off of Torsten Frings, and that Scottish referee, Mark. Oh, I had his name. I forgot his name, but I knew he was from Scotland.
Frings' hand did stop the ball from going in the goal.
It did.
That's your argument. Really,
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep. It's my argument. That should have been a penalty. Yeah. Should have been. But what are you gonna do? But
all right. Well, hopefully we'll get a better call in the next World Cup a year from now.
That's my hope as well. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I really am grateful that both of you have joined me tonight. Happy 75th anniversary to you and the St. Louisans and everyone who was part of that World Cup team. And it's for us, because if it's not for this great moment, we wouldn't be able to talk about it today. Thank you again for joining me tonight, and I'll talk to you again soon, okay?
All right, Daniel, thank you.
Thank you. Once again, Dave Lange from Society of American Soccer History, also known as S.A.S.H, as well as Soccer Main St. Louis Pod, and of course, former ESPN broadcast analyst for soccer, Ty Keogh, joining me tonight. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. And so, as we keep on going here on the Feuerstein's Fire American Soccer Show, and let me just do this one more time for everyone. Look at that scoreline. Look at that scoreline. Unbelievable. 1-0 for the United States in Brazil at Belo Horizonte. Joe Gaten's the only goal of the match, the 38th minute. Just unbelievable what we have seen back in that time. Unfortunately, if we were old enough or young enough then, of course, we would be celebrating it a lot more. But, you know, we need to talk about our history. We need to talk about our history of the game and just amazing things that have happened in the United States. And it's just been tremendous to watch what has happened there. And so, once again, just amazing men who have been a part of this show tonight, and part of that history, of course, Dave Lange researching it in Taikyo with his father, Harry, being a part of it. Now, before we move on to the next event, I want to let everyone know this week it's an Open Cup night across America. As we talk about, once again, we talk about the Open Cup. And there you have it right there. Everything on CBS Sports Galazzo Network and CBS Sports Network, streaming live on Paramount Plus Tuesday, July 8th at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Minnesota United FC will be hosting the Chicago Fire. That'll be on CBS Sports Network and Paramount Plus. And then the nightcap will be the San Jose Earthquakes hosting Austin FC, CBS Sports Galazzo Network, and also streaming on Paramount Plus. Wednesday, July 9th, at 7 o'clock Eastern, the Philadelphia Union hosting the New York Red Bulls on CBS Sports Network, also streaming Paramount Plus. And at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central, Nashville SC hosting DC United on CBS Sports Galazzo Network and also on Paramount Plus. Great stuff for you tonight. Now we move on, of course, to the New York Red Bulls and the review of their road match against the San Jose Earthquakes. And that one, my friends, is a 1-1 draw. And some changes being made here with this scoreline. Of course, originally, it was originally given to Vitor Costa to make it 1-1 the 58th minute, but because apparently review of the goal showed Mohamed Sofo, who did catch up to Vitor Costa, apparently the shot deflected off of Sofo and into the back of the net. It became an own goal. So that's why you see the red circle around the soccer ball for San Jose, because as you can see in red, of course, own goal. Emil Forsberg had a great goal in the 19th minute, basically got sprung from Peter Stroud's pass, made some fabulous moves, did lose the ball, but did regain it and scored a hell of a goal in the 19th minute to give that 1-0 lead. And then, of course, as we already talked about, Mohamed Sofo, unfortunately, own goal to give the Quakes the equalizer. DeJuan Jones, for him, 2 yellows within 10 minutes with a persistent foul in the 54th minute, but then his second yellow, then red, in the 64th minute on a reckless challenge against Peter Stroud, and that put the Quakes down to 10 men. Unfortunately, the Red Bulls could not gain advantage in this one to get the full 3 points. They did have a goal, but due to interference by Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting as a second half substitute, unfortunately, the Sean Nealis goal was wiped out because of the interference on the goalkeeper that happened. So unfortunately, they did not get the full 3 points. They do get a point, though, and they will be in Philadelphia 2 for the price of 1, 2 games within a week, as they'll play in the Open Cup quarterfinal game on the road at Subaru Park this Wednesday, and they will be back at Subaru Park for league play this coming Saturday. Once again, 7 o'clock Eastern this Wednesday on CBS Sports Network. Check your local listings and what channel number it is on your cable box, or if you have the streaming services. But if you have Paramount Plus, it should be right there online. And then, of course, on Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. So there you have it for tonight. I want to thank my guests once again. I want to thank Ty Keogh, former ESPN soccer analyst, and, of course, former soccer player, coach, and all around his very nice guy, obviously, Ty Keogh, and soccer historian out of St. Louis from the Society of American Soccer History, also known as S.A.S.H, Dave Lange. My name is Daniel Feuerstein. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I hope all of you are enjoying it tonight. Once again, please, please, please enjoy your football. Thank you. Take care. So long, and have a good night. Bye-bye for now. Have a good night, everybody.